Hi everyone, I'm Corey Alderdice, Director of the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts, and welcome to part 2 of a 3-part series on finding a narrative and choosing a path for college admissions. In part 1, we talked about the changing landscape as well as the topics that are on both students' and families' mind as they undertake this all-important process. In this second video, we'll be looking a little more closely at why stories matter, and particularly how to build a compelling story that stands out among a pool of thousands of applicants nationwide. One of the things that gifted and talented students, particularly those like ones who attend ASMSA, should keep in mind is that in the college selection process, despite having already been chosen for an incredible opportunity like ASMSA, you're often the ordinary exceptional. Now, that doesn't mean that you haven't had a lot of accomplishments. That doesn't mean that you haven't done great things. And it certainly doesn't mean that there's not a reason why you're at ASMSA. But when you magnify and extend that pool to thousands of students nationwide, all of these applicants for particularly competitive institutions like the Ivies, like research institutions, and other of these, quote, name brand schools will all have very good ACT or SAT scores. They will all have a perfect, if not near perfect, GPA and a variety of extracurricular activities and accomplishments under their belt. So when all is said and done, what makes you different? What helps you stand out when all of the numbers and core pieces are the same? And ultimately, that comes down to the narrative that you create and how you articulate both your interest and what you'll add to a particular college campus and community of learning. So once you get past the standardized numbers, exceptional tilt is what you're looking for. Standout students have to have a commitment to a personal quest, a passion, or a cause that aligns with your strengths, your gifts, and your ambitions. And here's the important thing about exceptional tilt, or that compelling part of your application. It's not something that you can fake. It has to effectively be who you are. A lot of the times, students often think that there is a particular type of candidate that admissions officers are looking for. And in many cases, there are topics, traits, skills that do align with a particular university or a particular department or program. But at the end of the day, you have to be you. Like we talked about at the very beginning of the first video, this is an important process not just for college, but it's also an opportunity to examine who you are, who you're becoming, and who you ultimately want to be. So you can't fake this one. You have to think about who you actually are and how you'll contribute to a college program. One other thing that I do want to highlight that often gets lost in the shuffle. For particularly competitive colleges and universities, they're often looking for SAT subject exams. ASMSA students and other bright young people are often fairly familiar with taking the ACT or the SAT or even AP exams, but the SAT subject exams do dive a little more specifically and deeper into particular content areas. These hour-long exams explore foreign language, literature, history, math at level 1 and level 2, biology, chemistry, and physics. And if you are applying to a particular department or program, often in the sciences, having that clear content mastery for a university is helpful in making their decision. A lot of universities require 2 subject exams. So as you're beginning to build your list of institutions, do make sure to pay attention to if an SAT 2 subject exam is a requirement for that school. So let's get back to setting the narrative. At the core of your narrative is your academic experience and the learning that you've participated in throughout your high school time. First and foremost, you want to demonstrate that you have success in a chosen area of study. Now, that first and foremost happens through your GPA. The second is that you do take advantage of college-level learning opportunities. Now, for some students, that's advanced placement coursework. For ASMSA students in particular, through our College Bridge program and through our partnership with the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith, ASMSA's requirements are built on directly earned college credit. A lot of the times parents will often wonder or be concerned that, oh, if our students don't have AP credit, is that going to disadvantage them in the process? And the answer to that's no. Colleges are simply looking to determine that you are learning and achieving at the highest levels, and you are maximizing the opportunities that are available to you where you are. So it is important to talk that way as you frame your concurrent credit courses taken at ASMSA. And then the other thing is that colleges are looking for global citizens, and that comes both through the study of foreign language as well as various cultural competencies. Remember, state of Arkansas graduation requirements do not include a foreign language, but most colleges are looking for 2 years of study, if not 3 years of study in a language. So the core academics are strong grades, learning at the highest level, and then again, how are you building on top of state and institutional requirements in particularly focused areas. Beyond the academics thing gets to your core theme. The application should emphasize your own desirable skills, activities, and experiences to create a compelling story. And that gets into the extracurricular components of your life. For the longest time, particularly, let's say 10 years ago, families thought that you had to do everything, that you had to be in a dozen different extracurricular organizations, and in some respects, universities did underscore those beliefs. They wanted students to be all things at all times. You needed a musician who was also an athlete, who also volunteered at soup kitchens and was an active participant in a church or a religious organization. You had to be everything, and quite frankly, there weren't enough hours in the day to do all of that. And as colleges and as schools focused more on mental health and achieving balance for young people, I think we saw a noticeable and important shift. And it's not so much trying to do everything, it's to pick a few things that you are deeply committed to and passionate about. It doesn't matter if you're in 12 organizations if you're only being a basic participant in those groups. Colleges want to see where you invest your time, where you plug in, and where you really connect. Probably the other essential component of crafting a compelling theme then is that all parts of the application should be consistent and serve to enhance each other. Think of it like a spider web where it starts in the middle, folds out, and things are connected as it branches out, and topics are connected in between. It shouldn't be a scattershot approach, but you're looking for each part to connect to the next in sequence. You don't have to be overly obtuse or erudite in what the theme is. Often it's better to keep that theme simple and straightforward, that you are a student that is interested in science and you enjoy building robots and you want to develop a successful startup at some point in the future. Basic skills that plug into activities that set a path for the future. So, and again, make sure that all parts of the application support that core theme, not just within your narrative, but what's on your transcript and who's writing recommendations for you. And we'll talk a little bit about more on that later. The other important thing to keep in mind is it's not just what you do, but why you do it in the first place. It's providing answers that frame your actions as how these things are particularly important to you. Just doing things doesn't provide any specific insight. That's just a bullet point list. Why is incredibly difficult, and yet at the same time it tells you the most about who you are as a person, as well as your character, your motivations, and your convictions. Remember, what is easy to express? What is what everybody is doing? Why is what is specific to you, and it's what helps your story to stand out among the others. So as you work to frame a narrative, that most often happens through the personal statement. And for ASMSA students watching this video, this is the core of the assignment that you'll be completing in Composition 2 this semester. And the personal statement tells us a lot of different things. First, it demonstrates the ability to communicate effectively, to write clearly, to tell a story. One of the things that often gets overlooked as well too is it demonstrates the ability to follow directions. These prompts are often very specific, especially as you branch out into other Common App essays as well as supplemental essays or specific essays for other institutions or scholarship programs. Realize that at times, even though these essays will be used again and again, a one-size-fits-all approach is not appropriate. If there is a specific prompt, make sure you are writing to and specifically for that prompt. Because if you can't follow basic directions, that should bring a little bit of concern. Third is focus. Most of the essay responses are limited in number. You can't go on for 20 pages. You can't write a small novel. And I think students will often find that framing their position, their ideas, their self in a concise and clear and limited format is far more difficult than having the ability to go on and on and on, especially when you think about 250-word essays. It goes by very, very quickly, and there's a lot that you have to accomplish in a narrow window. And we'll talk about a format here in a bit for a 500-word essay. Again, you're looking to highlight your own unique attributes. And that can, again, be a little bit of a challenge. You're looking for the things that make you, you, and not anyone else. Fifth is, how does the applicant add value to the college? In ASMSA's own admissions processes, the things that we tell prospective applicants is that we're looking for perspective, maturity, and passion. Again, what has happened to you in your life, in your own experiences that you can share directly through your own perspective. Maturity, that you are entering into a new phase of your life and you are going to be an active member of a community. And then finally, with passion, what are the things that you're genuinely excited about that you'll bring along with you? And the personal statement as well, it's important to think like an admissions officer. And step one in thinking like an admissions officer is realizing that you are going to be reading hundreds, if not thousands, of essays as part of this process. So amidst that sameness and often boredom, we are looking for anything, absolutely anything that stands out and helps to grab our attention, something to break the monotony. Also, plan to write one heck of a personal statement. I'll note a little bit how important that is for determining selection in a lot of colleges and universities. Often with a personal statement, it's good to focus in on a specific instance and then to expand out on that. Take an activity, focus on the relevance, and then as well as how that connects to others or to broader topics. And then finally, make sure that it does tie into the college and make it matter, not just to you, but make it matter to others as well. This is essential if you are writing a supplemental statement or essay for a scholarship program or for a particular university. Consider the structure. Again, when you're working in limited time and circumstances, sometimes approaching this from a structural standpoint, not necessarily a paint by numbers, but at least with some sense of a roadmap, will help guide you from point to point to point. An attention-getting device is probably the most important part of a basic structure. That's the title and first paragraph. Again, if there is a title, that helps to draw in the reader quickly and leaves them interested in where things are going to go from there. Often when you're a reviewer and reading an essay, you can probably tell within the first several sentences or paragraph whether or not this is something that you're going to be really interested in reading, or if you're simply trying to get to the end. So starting strong and making a compelling perspective from the beginning is absolutely important. Second is targeted subject matter, that the essay does establish a strong theme and connects and enhances the other parts of the college application. Also, when you're working in short times, you can't cram in a lot of different topics. So having that cohesive theme that is part of the overall narrative across all parts of the application is something to keep in mind. And then third, we've mentioned before that it's important that you convey a unique perspective, that it helps to demonstrate your own value and the potential you bring to a college or program. So that's all easy, right? Probably not. Also, I think the thing that we find with young people is, despite the idea that young people like to talk about themselves, that they like to overshare on social media, the things that they're doing, the things that they're eating, the things that they're listening to, when it actually comes to talking about yourself, and even in some respects selling oneself, the merits of one's abilities, it's difficult. And in that difficulty as well, you're trying to strike the right balance between articulating that value and yet not sounding overly self-confident. So beware the humble brag. Honestly, it doesn't matter what you accomplish if you can't talk about it in a reasonable and humble way. And it's important to realize that self-awareness, knowing who you are and what you've done and what's important to you, is also a very different thing from being overly self-confident and self-impressed with what you've been able to achieve. So with that in mind, it's not what you did in the experience, it's how the experience makes you different, makes you more mindful, makes you more aware of yourself and others that you want to be able to share in your response. So investing in you. Kind of as we've mentioned on several different occasions, this process is an opportunity to explore who you are and who you want to be. So how you spend your time as both a student and also as a person outside of school does help to provide some insights into you as an individual. And remember, you're not just a number in this process. Even when you are one of 20,000 students applying for a particularly selective college or university, they are still, admissions officers are still thinking about you as an individual, and particularly how you as an individual are going to contribute down the line. This is, in some respects, an investment. Colleges, institutions, programs are building a cohort of young people from a variety of different places, backgrounds, and experiences. And how all of those individuals contribute into a community is particularly important. If this was paint by numbers, if this was simply based on scores, if this was an arbitrary process, it would be a lot easier and it would take a whole lot less time. So I guess the thing that I want you to realize as you think about how admissions officers themselves do approach this process is they do agonize over it. Maybe not quite as much as you yourself agonize over what you're doing in it, but they do take this very seriously, and they do think very carefully and mindfully about who is the right fit and who will contribute. So again, you do need to have functional goals as an institution about building a cohort with the right diversity geographically, socioeconomically, racially, but at the same time too, you are building an aspirational group of young people who should make a considerable difference in life and learning at the college. So even though this is very much about the institution's needs, it's also about making that investment in you as an individual. This process is mutually beneficial for the applicant and for the institution. So, if it is going to be mutually beneficial, how do you contribute? What are you doing? I think it's helpful to look at this in three different type of preneurs. So you can contribute by being a preneur, but are you an entrepreneur? Are you an intrapreneur? Or are you an extrapreneur? Entrepreneurs are a topic and a concept that we're all fairly familiar with, thanks to Silicon Valley and a host of billionaire geniuses. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're someone that creates something from scratch, something new out of whole cloth. You build something out of nothing. Are you the type of person that likes to take a wild new concept and make an idea reality? Or are you an entrepreneur? And I think entrepreneurs are particularly helpful parts of groups and organizations. This is someone who works within the confines of an existing structure, and sometimes it's safer to do that. Entrepreneurs grapple with a tremendous amount of risk and uncertainty, but entrepreneurs do the hard, consistent work of building and sustaining a group or an organization. So how does that play out maybe in a traditional high school scenario? Entrepreneurs are young people who often create a new club, an organization, a nonprofit, or even a business. But entrepreneurs are the ones that are taking organizations that have been around for a long time. Think about maybe a Spanish club that's typically had, burritos and a Cinco de Mayo party each year. And maybe this is a young person who comes in as the president or an officer of a club and says, maybe we should be doing relevant outreach or establish relevant connections with the Latinx community in our hometown. So they didn't have to build a new club, but they were able to help the organization do something new and different. Or are you an extrapreneur, someone who creates interesting and worthwhile adventures? Are you an extrovert who is also one that's in the process of constant learning and discovery? You may not have something tangible, but are you adding extra value? So, are you an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, or an extrapreneur? So as your theme begins to emerge, it's important to think about how you consistently reinforce that theme, but you're not just saying the same thing over and over and over again. I'm really interested in math. I'm in math club. I like to take competitive math exams. I want to be a mathematician. Those are consistent, but again, it rings a little bit hollow. So if the personal statement repeats the resume, which is often part of the things that you upload, or even other parts of the application, you might come off as one-dimensional. So readers want to see you as a person. Again, not just the what, but why. Why are these things important to you? Why is this who you are intrinsically as an individual? Are you a friend? Are you a philosopher, an activist, an explorer, an academic? It's not that you're just interested in one thing, but how that thing and why that thing frames you as a person and as an individual. So again, we talked about a little bit of a framework. A lot of personal statements will kind of be in that 500-word range. And so as you look to condense a lot of big ideas into a small space, we'll walk you through 7 different things point by point. So again, you start with that AGD, that attention-grabbing hook, an introduction to you as an individual. The personal statement then focuses on a specific instance or event. And that event then demonstrates unique life experiences and perspective that ultimately connects and expands on the applicant's extracurricular activities and passions while reinforcing the application theme, talking about how that connects to the next steps and the institution and the place you want to be, while personalizing and humanizing you not just as a piece of paper in front of the reader, but also as an individual human being. So point to point to point to point. So this next scenario is one that's often my favorite part of the discussion when this conversation is live and in person with students. And this is a young person who did graduate from ASMSA a few years ago. And at our own interview weekend, their parent was volunteering to help. And They came up and said, I'm a little disappointed that my student didn't get into the school they really wanted to attend. And hey, I understand you used to work in admissions, so would you be willing to have a look at their application and see if you can maybe figure out why we didn't get the outcome that we were hoping for. So what you see on screen is some of the broad strokes of what I was able to pick out of the application itself. So here's what we've got. We've got a personal statement that was on the joy that comes from participating in dance programs and artistic experiences. The short answer essays focus mostly on the individual's experiences in their humanities classes at ASMSA. And to that point, the letter of recommendation came from the composition teacher as well as Brian Adams, who's our French instructor at the school. And then the individual had an ACT math score of 28. Okay, so question at the header here is, where was this student applying? What do you think? Based on the information in front of you, it might seem reasonable to think that the young person was applying to either an art school, a dance program, or even maybe a liberal arts college, right? That would seem natural. In truth, the student was applying to the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. If we'll go back to video 1, which is on parents' top 10 list of most attractive schools. I also throw in the ACT math score of 28 because the program, particularly the college that the student was applying to at University of Michigan, was the College of Engineering, which again is one of the university's most standout and highly competitive programs. As I said before, student did not get into University of Michigan's engineering program. Now, I will say probably one of the most important parts of the puzzle that was missing is that ACT math score probably was not in competitive range for the institution. So that very much would have been a reach school based on the academic profile. At the same time, though, the supplemental parts of the application, the overall narrative from the personal statement and the short answer essays, did not seemingly express a direct interest in STEM or particularly engineering, let alone the individuals who seemingly know this student the best and are making the case for selection to this specific and highly competitive program are not ones that can authentically speak to either the abilities in that subject area or even, quite frankly, a passion in that subject area. So this was not a narrative that closely aligned to the goals or the outcomes that the student was seeking. And again, this was a pretty easy one to kind of see where maybe things didn't quite stack up. So I think that's especially important as you start to make your own decisions, as you're actively working to build your application. How do all pieces of the puzzle fit together? I noted before that story is an incredibly critical component, and for many colleges and universities, 30 to 50% of the decision to admit is based on that personal essay. So up to half of the work comes down to 500 words. That's why it's important. That's why we spend a lot of time working on that personal statement in the composition courses, and that's why it's got to sing in order to help you get the outcome that you're wanting. So again, relaying your authentic self is essential because it demonstrates that you have put considerable time and effort in for introspection, preparation, and execution. This is not the kind of thing that you wing. This is not the kind of thing that you write on the fly. This will be the central document in your application, and it's why you've got to be willing to invest a lot of time, patience, and effort into crafting the best possible essay. So it, along with your letters of recommendation, are probably what ultimately does separate you from similar pools of applicants with ACT scores, GPAs, and even geographic profiles. So that completes part 2 of this discussion on how you build a compelling narrative as you set your path for college admissions. In part 3, we'll wrap things up with a little bit of discussion on things to keep in mind as you complete the application process and how all of this stitches together, as well as ultimately how this doesn't always work out the way that we hope it does. Feel free to connect with me via email or as well on social media, and also connect with the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts. Thanks for tuning in, and hope you move on to part 3.